And we're live. Welcome to you, the viewer, and to our fantastic panel. It's the after dram, and that means it's time to unwind. So put your feet up, grab a dram or two. I filled up after the last one. I didn't want to be empty-handed anymore. And relax. It's going to be a good time. It's going to be a fantastic hour. As a quick recap to our evening, Cheryl, Dave, Drew, Kent, Nick, Sheila, and I have done a deep dive into lessons 3 and 4 of, and there's the book. Put it back down. The Complete Whiskey Course with author Robin Robinson. It was informative. It was entertaining. It was fun, and the fun's just begun. So let's do another round of introductions. Please tell us what's in your glass now and other handles, everything like that. So we're going to do the same thing. We'll do Robin, Cheryl, Dave. We're skipping, obviously, Drew and Sheila because they're doing a tasting right now, so they had to run. But we're going to finish. Last but not least will be Nicole this time. So you're up, Robin.
Okay, hey, I'm still actually working with the brand with barrel spirits, and so these are American independent bottlers, and this is a I believe it's an American whiskey of some sort with an apricot brandy barrel finish. So pretty awesome.
All right, thank you very much, and Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl. I'm Cheryl's One on all social media. I'm actually still doing my Blantons. However, did a bottle kill.
All right.
She did that during it. I thought you were driving her to drink, and that's what she was doing. It's like
this is all right. She has a backup, but you notice it's an upgrade, right?
The gold.
Which horse is it?
It's she's upgrading.
I'm doing the regular. I have the gold to go back to.
Oh yeah,
and
there you go.
And you'll tell us what letters on the back. Dave, you're up.
All right, guys, it's Yukon Dave coming from his basement. I'm drinking this JP Trodden that I got brewed and bottled out in Washington State. I think I'm going to go back and get a second bottle so I can put it away.
Nice. Beautiful. And Nick, you're up.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick. I can be found as Black Hat Whiskey on social media. I am doing 4 Roses, but I changed it up and it's in my tea tonight.
Nice. And I've got 2. So I did the Clyde Mace, so right there. And that was highlighted. I don't know if this was the one that you had in your book or not, Robin.
It's in the book.
It is.
Clyde,
yeah, it is.
Well, Clyde Mace is, but I didn't know if it was
exactly the same one.
And
it was
I like double fist, and I like doing peated with non-peated. So Westland, and I love Westland. I really do. And one of the few people to have the guts to actually have a twist off cap with whiskey. Not
very Japanese. That's just like the Nika bottle, man. It's absolutely right.
Beautiful. But I like it. I do, and I have some hefty pours, so I'm going back from the peat to the non-peat. But so I'll have a really fun time here, no matter what's being said in the background.
Yeah,
I'll be just fine. Thank you very much. So let's and as always, guess what I'm starting with? Page 73 is a quote.
Ken's still drinking the thing from the first time.
And this relates to 2 books, actually. So our present book and 2 books ago. So some whiskey men held on through the 20th century downturn in whiskey drinking that began in the 1960s. They worked the mills, stills, the barrel rooms through the lean years and now have been rock star or given rock star status among the new generation of drinkers. So Robin, I'm wondering if you ever had the chance to read David Jennings' book right there.
No, it's making a huge splash right now, and I'm probably going to pick it up in the new year. Yeah,
it's a quick read because I think it's only 100 pages, and then the other 150 pages are very specific information about the wild turkey expressions they have.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite parts is about the men described here, and they're called the Road Warriors. So page 47 from them. I'll do that. Let's do that. I'll show you their quote. I don't usually quote another person's book on your thing, but they were the voices of bourbon. They gave it heart and reached consumers in ways advertisements never could. And it's really true, but I really like the story behind these guys. They went out on the road. So we had Jimmy Russell, Booker No, Elmer T. Lee, Parker Bean from Heaven Hill. So we got some major names that in the 80s and 90s went on tours, and they talked to the people about bourbon. And this was a bad time. It was the glut area in the 80s and the 90s. Bourbon was not the thing to drink, and these guys came in and they bumped it up a little bit. So I'm wondering if and he goes on to talk about not just what they did there, but my favorite part was them coming together at night after the shows or between shows, and their suppers together and how they talk to each other. I think that was the best part. Oh, sorry. I'll say that again. The best part was these guys coming together at suppers or after the shows, and their time together after the shows. So these big names, these big, massive men in the industry, just talking about what they love. And I'm wondering, because you were kind of in the same gig as these guys, you weren't a master distiller, but you were in the industry, and I'm wondering if you had that same experience before the shows with guys that had been around for a long time. You just had a pocket of people, men, women, doesn't matter, just came together, and you knew each other so well that it was so much fun. I'm hoping you have a story about that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, tons of those stories. Number one about those about those guys, and it's one of the things I highlight in the book. These were factory workers.
Yeah.
These were factory workers. Now, I come from Pittsburgh. I grew up in a little town called Homestead, which was the largest steel mills in the world at one time. You know, before World War, we were the ones who built all of the battleships in World War II. You know, I walked down Fifth Avenue in New York City. I look up at the Empire State Building. I know exactly where those steel beams came from. They came from my town, right?
Yeah.
Now, so I love the idea of physical blue collar labor. I mean, it's part of my DNA.
Well, it goes back to the Robbie Burns thing you're quoting as well. It's all the people coming up.
Well, yeah, it's the people, but it's the. I mean, again, we were factory workers. I mean, I grew up like inhaling fucking smoke. You know, my first 21 years. You know, so I can appreciate what these guys were doing from a micro level. I mean, and then when I actually got to understand how distillation worked, and I used to I worked in steel mills, so I love it, and I respect them for the fact of what it is that they did. You know, of the work that they did.
Yeah,
that to me is the ultimate form of respect. Jimmy Russell will tell you when all the crowds are away, this is a fucking hoot, you know, right? He can't believe this. He can't believe this. The people are like coming and lining up, and like I want to talk to him, and Jim. Oh shit, what was Jim's name from Four Roses that just retired?
No, sorry, I was thinking Jimmy Russell.
No, not Jim. No, but Jim. Anyway, come to me a second. He was the same way, right? And they couldn't believe this. You know, they couldn't believe, and quite honestly, Jim McEwen was the same way in Scotland, and so was Willie Tate, who was from Jura, and Richard Patterson, and there was kind of like these guys were just laborers in an industry, and they had management jobs, but I mean essentially they were like, who the fuck cared, and then all of a sudden, man, you're Jimi Hendrix, and I mean they're getting it's the biggest kick in the world to them, because when they were doing this, there was no thought of this accolades and this adoration that people are giving them now. And that to me, now I did write another an article for Whiskey Wash just recently about the guys who sold their brands. Ooh, you see. Okay. So one of the guys, when I was at Compass Box, we had a broker down in Texas. His name, Giacomo Jim Butera.
Oh,
Giacomo Jim Butera, right? And Giacomo was Austin Nichols' company, right? That was Wild Turkey, right? He was with them for 35 years. He ran their Texas sales.
okay.
Right. So I remember, like, so I worked with him. He was our broker for Compass Box, and I worked with him for years. I just talked to him on the phone the other day. I wrote an article about him because those are the guys. Him and Arthur Shapiro, who used to be with Seagram's, and a couple of these guys that I met over the years. And these are the guys who they were the ground troops, man. They were the ground troops. They were the guys that just went out day after day after day after day after day after day and made this shit work. You know, those are my heroes.
Okay.
Those are my heroes, right? They just like made it work. Boom, 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 boom. Grinding. Sales, you know. And so all those guys are awesome. You know, and yeah, I think, you know, Jimmy Russell is, God bless him. He's in his 80s. He's getting absolutely. He's a rock star. He's like fucking Jimi Hendrix, you know, and he should be, because of all of that legitimate, you know. Have you read like Malcolm Gladwell's The Outliers?
No.
You're familiar with that? Yeah, if the 10,000 hours, right? Right. So, I mean, so what Gladwell does is he kind of like, he gives a completely different approach to what success really means. And it's typically a confluence of a whole bunch of different events. And then certain people were able to actually take advantage of it and other people weren't. And the people who were able to take advantage of it, like, you know, the Beatles and Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, they had put in 10,000 hours of work with no understanding of what was going to happen on the other end. And then opportunity came and they were able to grab it. And then boom, right? And this is Jimmy Russell, you know, Jim Rutledge. That was the person I was thinking about. Jim Rutledge, who was the former master distiller at Four Roses. And, you know, I had a wonderful talk with Al Young. God bless him, before he died. So Al Young was the global brand ambassador for Four Roses. And so Four Roses was a Seagram's distillery, right? Because Seagram's had bought the Calvert Company. And the Calvert was the original Four Roses. I've got a fabulous bottle downstairs. I should have picked it up during the break, of the old Four Roses blend, you know, in a quart bottle. And cool. I'll show it to you later.
Okay.
And Al Young was a retired distillery manager. He ran the Calvert Distillery, which is now called the Four Roses Distillery. And he was over at MGP in Indiana. And he did some time up in Canada, up at LaSalle as well. And he was a Seagram's man.
Okay.
He was a Seagram's man. And you became, you know, that was the Mad Men era, you know, the Mad Men era, where you were the organizational man. You and the organization were one, you know, and then there was that downturn in the 70s and the 80s when no
bourbon,
right?
No Scotch either. Bourbon, Scotch,
no,
the old drinks.
No whiskey. Yeah, it happened in Japan as well. I mean, Japan's whiskey actually, Japan's whiskey consumption dropped as well. So everyone, Canada, you know, United States, Scotland, of course, Ireland had already lost its entire heritage at that point. And Al said, you know, and thank God they kept me on. They kept me on because I was a Seagram's man. I had to actually always talk the Seagram's story. I had to always, you know, put out the Seagram's line. But at the end of the day, they took care of me. They got me through.
They got
me through that. And that was a different time. That was a completely different time. I tell you what, man, Sam Bronfman. If I could write a whole chapter on Sam Bronfman, I would write a whole chapter on Sam Bronfman. Because
See,
that
you and me are
dude,
the same.
huh?
When we were talking to Davin about in our very first book club, our favorite people, he was my favorite guy out of. Well, and there's quite a few stories and quite a few characters in Canadian whiskey as well.
Yeah.
But he was mine because he was a bad boy. I liked it. I liked the fact
Well, it's
that
not that he was a bad boy. He was a fucking genius.
he knew how to manipulate. He did.
He was a
And
fucking
he took advantage.
genius. He took advantage, but also here's the other thing that people don't give Bronfman credit for: quality control. Quality control. This was his fingerprint. This is what he put on the whiskey industry. Quality control. You look at LaSalle. Yeah, did I tell you the story about the Crown Royal
In
right?
LaSalle?
So,
What it
no,
was?
well,
No.
well, so I bought. So what? Jim Murray came out a couple of years ago.
No,
and
you
said,
did. You had the Crown Royal from
the 59, the 1959. I mean, like, how the fuck do you do that? Yeah, quality control. That was Bronfman. You go to Fujikatemba. You know who that is?
He's not Suntory. He's
No, Fujikatemba is the distillery that they were partners with in Japan that is now owned by Kirin. Who owns who?
Who owned? You help me.
Who do they own now? They own Four Roses. You see the connection?
We do now.
Yeah, well, the Brett Elliott, right? Who's the head distiller, the master distiller at Four Roses? He was hired by Yota Tanaka. Yota Tanaka he's like maybe the most brilliant guy in Japan, and he's a Seagram's guy, right? So Fujikatemba is I've got like an old New York Times article about Seagram's and Japanese whiskey coming to the United States back in the 1970s. But Fujikatemba was their was the Seagram's partner. And they were using them as a bottlers, and of course, Japanese whiskey is whatever the Japanese decide it's going to be. And so they imported a lot of Scotch. And so Seagram's had, Seagram's had Scotch whiskeys, they had Irish whiskeys, they had American whiskeys, Canadian whiskeys. This was all, imported, exported over there. And then they would blend it, and that would be Japanese whiskey. But remember, it was all domestic. It was all domestic, and it wasn't for export.
Mm-hmm.
But so you start putting all these dots together, right? And Sam Bronfman's right in the middle of it. Sam Bronfman's right in the middle of it. Man. The guy was fucking brilliant, man. He was awesome. Him and Harry Hatch.
Yeah.
He's
I want to hear about the quality control, though. So how did he do that?
Yeah.
Because I'm just wondering
where do you think the idea of Canadian methodology comes from? Seagram's.
Okay. All right. Well, we've got some big distilleries all at the same time, and they all kind of lasted and took over each other. I'm just wondering why.
But the methodology of doing 1 grain distillation
over and over. Okay.
That's method Canadian, right? That is, all of my corn gets distilled and aged separately. All of my barley, all of my wheat, all of my rye, and then we blend.
Yeah.
Right. That was that, and then all of the quality control methodology, which is the unsexiest thing about whiskey as well, is quality control, right? But Brett Elliott will tell you, who is the master distiller at Four Roses, that's what he was hired as. He was hired by Tanaka as to be a quality control guy. That's how you learn. That's how you come up through the system. You come up by doing. So when I was talking to the 2 people up at LaSalle, And when I was doing research for the book, and we were talking about how did you do this over 60 years? When I went into both of their backgrounds, they both came through QC. They both came through QC. So the idea that quality is number one. Think about that. Quality is number one. What did Canada do before anybody else did?
Well, 2 years aging, then 3 years. So
why? Because they actually established a Canadian methodology, a government standard, right? 1892, 1890, before the American Bottled and Bond Act was 1897, and then the British government didn't do the Pure Food and Drug Act until 1986. Canada was 20 years ahead of everybody.
All about taxes, though, because that was our tax base. All taxes.
It's all about taxes. That's why I love. That's why, right? The distiller, right? Yep. The farmer, the distiller, the monk, and the tax man. The tax man.
We keep changing. We keep coming back to it. It's good.
We keep coming back to the tax man. I tell you what, I got nothing but respect for the Bronfmans.
Okay, I thought you were going to say the tax man. I'm going to go. I don't know about that. I can agree with a lot, Robin. But
hey, look, I just want to say this publicly. I got nothing but respect for the tax man. Okay, right? Because it's the end of the year is coming.
That poor bastard's doing that. Don't audit me. Do not audit me, you bastards. Thank you. Yeah. I'm going back.
Check this out.
Somehow I don't believe that.
Beautiful. And what's that? Dunn Vineyards,
Dunn Vineyards,
Cabernet, right? These guys, they're out of control.
I'm going to ask this question of everyone. It was going to be Robin at first because he talks about MGP, Midwestern Grain Product. And I don't know if any of you have actually looked online. And the promotion, as soon as you go on it, it's a promotion for you to actually buy their product, to blend your own stuff, to actually sell. So I'm wondering, Robin, did you ever think about doing this? Because you have some connections, you know some people in the industry, maybe you help some people get established or link them up with them. But I'm wondering if you ever thought about getting your own brand, ever try to bottle your own kind of, because I would love to, but I don't have capital and I don't know enough people.
I'll be honest with you. It's in the back of my head all the time. But quite honestly, I'm such a front of the house guy that the patience and the work required to do shit like that, it's kind of not really in my head,
because you could have the vision and they'll figure it out for you. You just have to
that's exactly it. If I had the resources to say, okay, here's the idea, okay, you guys go out and put it together, and then I'll agree to it. Yeah, right. But until that happens, then that's not gonna happen. I just don't have the patience for it. I'd much rather be out doing, hey, let me tell you about this.
Yeah,
that's kind of
I'll taste everything in the world, and I'll promote the stuff I love.
I'm a sales guy that wrote a whiskey book. That's all I am. I'm just a sales guy that wrote a whiskey book.
No, there's different things. Well, there's different angles. No. Well, and I don't know. I didn't say this. Did you see that Davin was on earlier on in the first whiskey book? He came on. He did. He left a couple comments, said hi to you.
I apologize. I was on a tear. I saw his name at the bottom, and I should have just stopped and just recognized it. So, Davin, I apologize. Great. Thank you for coming on.
He loves you. He said that you're friends, and I was emailing him this week because we're doing a tasting on the 27th. We're selling his book and doing a tasting. Great. And he said you're a lovely person, and he doesn't know what picture you're talking about when you talked about that colorful picture you have of his. I said we've been trying to get it out of you, but he wouldn't tell us.
Because I'm only going to send it to Davin because it's like, and then I'm going to let him decide. Okay. He doesn't even know I have it. He doesn't even know I have it.
The email clip.
He said that so is he doing a tasting with you next week?
Yeah, we're doing it.
Okay. Well, I'll send it to him this week, and then he can decide whether or not he wants to share it with you.
Beautiful. And you know what? You spend half a year with a guy every Saturday night. You get to know him a little well, and you know where to poke and prod a little bit. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Oh, he's fabulous. I love him. He's just a wonderful, wonderful person, man. Yeah. I really do like him a lot. Yeah, that's great.
All right.
I'm going to send it to him first because I respect him. I want him to actually have the last,
That's very nice.
the last word on this.
I wouldn't. I would have just posted it up here and had everyone look at it. The 100.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Just send it to me because in my
Just
name.
apologize later. It doesn't matter. It's all good.
Right.
Panel.
Ask for forgiveness. Right. Yeah.
Panel. Quick question: is there a difference between a whiskey geek and a bourbon geek? Because we talked about bourbon a lot, and when we looked at page, I don't know if you have the book right there, but page 76, 77, tons of information.
This book?
Right? So that book there, page 76, 77. So 2 books ago, we talked to David Jennings. We saw how much information is available about rick houses, specific rick houses, and he was telling us with the bottles that we had, you know what, that's the wild card rick house, and this is what you're going to get from that rick house. I don't think we have that information in the Scotch world, and we might, but maybe I just don't know it enough. And the other whiskey fact, and my favorite whiskey fact, if you haven't, I love these. At the very bottom, you get the whiskey facts. It's about Four Roses, how they had 2 different mash bills, and they've got the 4 proprietary yeast strains. This type of information, I'm not sure is available to the even the type of guy that reads a lot about Scotch. What do you got? Oh, you've got it right there. Perfect. And there's the mash bills.
You know where this came from? You know where this came from?
From them?
Seagram's.
Okay. Quality
This is
control. They know
Seagram's.
exactly what they're doing.
This is Seagram's. This is the brilliance. Again, this is why Seagram's is so influential, right? So they're the only distillery in Kentucky that operates that way. When you go over to Buffalo Trace, what does Buffalo Trace make? They make Buffalo Trace. They make Eagle Rare. They make Pappy Van Winkle, right? They make Blanton's. They make Ancient Age. They make, guess what? They use 1 yeast strain.
And so the
One
difference
yeast strain.
is the aging for all of them. Whereas Four Roses, it's the mash bills and the yeast and the aging.
Yeah, so with Buffalo Trace, it's mash bill, and so it's mash bill and maturation, right? With Four Roses is the only distillery that has this uniqueness, and why is that? Seagram's.
Okay. It's either Seagram's now or the tax man. That's the 2 things you're going to ask me.
Well,
It's
yeah,
what?
right. Yeah,
It's
there
the
you go.
tax
Right.
man.
So it really
Seagram's.
kind of comes down
It's
to
one of
that.
the 2.
This or that, right? Yeah, right. But no, that was the whole. This is a Seagram's, and this is a Seagram's influence, and that's LaSalle, right? That's LaSalle,
Okay.
right? So yeah, so this thing on 76 and 77 here in the book, this is about how confusing American whiskey is.
But there's specific knowledge, and you know what? There's stuff in there that I didn't know. There wasn't. So reading into it, the specifics of it, I tend to think of myself as fairly well read when it comes to whiskey. But there was specifics in there that I didn't get. And there's another one where you were talking about, and it's not a quote from that page, it's another page, that if whiskey bears straight designation, it's 2 years, at least 2 years, but it's under 4 years, which confused me. And I need you to tell me about that. What happens when it's over 4 years? It's not straight anymore?
Well, no, it is, but 4 years can get the bottled and bond designation. See,
Okay.
So if it's
But that's 50% though.
Well, yeah, exactly, right. So therein lay the confusion. So if you label it as straight, but the whiskey is under 4 years old, so straight means a minimum 2. So anywhere between 24 months and a day, right? And 16 months and a day, you have to actually state how old it is.
Okay.
That's the designation.
All right.
Now, if it gets over 4 years and you actually can then fulfill the other Yeah, so Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, right?
Yeah.
So those are
New Oak 50%, whatever else, it's bottled.
well,
and
you actually it's one distiller, one season, 50%, and minimum 4 years, right? Exactly, right. So that's the bottled and bond. So yeah, so it again, this is why now. However, straight whiskey, right?
Mhm.
Straight whiskey is different than straight bourbon. You see.
Okay, is it just
so the word straight? The word straight has to be looked at in context of how it's actually being done. So, for example, an American blended whiskey will say that it is a blend of straight whiskeys and, like, for example, like Seagram 7 is like neutral grain spirits, right?
Yeah.
So it has to be designated as that. It's crazy. It's crazy. This is the aftermath of Prohibition.
Okay.
You know, this is something that Americans went through that no other country went through. And as a result, and the other thing is this, back in 1906, when they went to, who was the president? Was Chester Arthur? Chester A. Arthur?
I'm going to trust you. You could say just about anything, and I'll agree.
I don't know. Yeah, right. Who knows? Yeah. Anyway, I think it was. He was the president at the time when the Pure Food and Drug Acts were being passed on both continents now.
Okay.
And then the question, what is whiskey, went to him. And he was trained as a lawyer. And after he, not only that, but after he actually, he served his time as the president of the United States, he became a Supreme Court justice, right?
Okay.
So this guy is all about writing legal shit, right?
Yeah.
And he essentially wrote out what we now see as the standards of identity, which is just a 28-page legal document that takes everything down to this legalese. And that's where all of this in the book comes from. This is sort of the quote unquote, the distillation of that standards of identity. And you know, the standards of identity is actually, it's a book. It's about that thick. No. It's crazy.
Yeah,
but in that, this is what you read when you're sick at night and you can't get to sleep. Oh, I think I'll open this.
This is the book we give to Nicole to read, and she can give us Cole's notes on it.
What was that?
She's not going to do it. He was saying Nicole will read it for us. She likes to do the nitpicky stuff. But Robin, I thought I knew though what straight whiskey, straight bourbon was. It's 51% rye. If we're talking about rye, it's 51%.
No. That's just the definition of rye.
Well, you could have a rye whiskey that's not straight rye whiskey, and it doesn't have to be 51%.
But the definition of rye whiskey in America is a minimum 51%.
Okay, not
okay. That's just rye. And then straight means there's no additives, right?
Yep.
There's nothing else added to it, and it's a minimum of 2 years in a brand new barrel, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So rye whiskey, malt whiskey, and bourbon whiskey all have the 51%.
Right.
Designation. Right.
And that's where I went with straight. Whenever I talked to people, it was always that 2 years and 51% of that made it straight. The bottled and bond made it a little bit more restrictive because they'd have to go through the government agency to establish that it was bottled and bond. I didn't know it was over 4 years old.
Well, think of it as layers. Think of it as tiers. So the first tier is that what does establish the type of whiskey. So bourbon, rye, and malt whiskey and wheat whiskey all have to be designated 51%. And then the next tier on top of that would be straight.
And then bottled. Right.
And then the next tier on top of that would be actually, but believe it or not, in between there would be from a particular state.
Okay.
So like Kentucky or Indiana or Virginia, for example, would be a minimum year in, right? Well, that's different though. But Alabama, you see the word style?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's built like something.
Man.
You can do anything with style.
Yeah, we're gonna kind of like move it around a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So then how about this one? Because it says it's aged 10 years, right?
Right.
It's a Kentucky straight. Would you not advertise it as being bottled in bond?
Is it 50%?
It's not 50%.
It's got to be 50.
Oh.
Okay.
Or
It's not
sorry,
50%.
Obviously,
it's not minimum 50. It's exactly 50.
It actually has. Yeah, bottled in bond has to be at 50%. Yeah. That's
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And of course, in the case of Basil Hayden's right there on that one, then the 10-year is really it's a marketing not a gimmick. No. Marketing is not always a gimmick, and this is the important thing to think about marketing. Marketing is actually incredibly important because marketing will then give the back information to it that you may not get, right? So they are definitely advertising that it's 10 years because they want you to know it's 10 years. It's 10 years old. Now, at one point, yeah, that's going to justify the price for it. Because why is 10 years more expensive than a 5-year? Because there's less of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Angel share. It's
Yeah.
been in there for so much longer.
All of that.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So marketing does have a very important. It does have a very, very important role. There's bad marketing and then there's bad sales too. But yeah, no, marketing is and when you go to Japan, marketing is literally linked.
Mhm.
Whiskey is not made without marketing.
Okay.
Because it's if you're familiar with the concept of Kaizen, right? So it's
You do
part of
marketing and make the whiskey to match.
it's blender, marketing, production, and they are perfect, and they just like absolutely, yeah.
All right.
So yeah.
So the original point was, and we're going to come back to this, and I'm going to ask you first, Nick, if that's all right. Do we think there's a difference between the whiskey or the Scotch whiskey geeks and the bourbon geeks? Because Robin was talking about last week, we talked about the sweet
Bourbon
spot.
geeks are fucking obnoxious. I'm just going to tell you right now.
I've met a few. I like it a lot too, but they might be obnoxious. But I'm wondering if there is a difference. The sweet spot. You always know about certain things, but you don't put it to words all the time. And I think bourbon people can put them to words a little bit more, or it's more organized in their thoughts. I'm not sure. Nick, I'm throwing it over to you. Are whiskey geeks and bourbon geeks different? Or is it just that we know a lot about Scotch that maybe the bourbon geeks don't know and they would think it's really cool?
I think that geekiness is at both levels. Bourbon geek is what we've seen a lot of barrels where they're sitting mash bills.
Yeah.
Scotch whiskey geeking, it's rarity of a whiskey. It's finding the unicorns. It's this exclusive bottling. It's Jim. It's whoever. It's geek on both sides. It's just different types of geeks.
All right, maybe it's just coming to the forefront now because we're doing bourbon really for the first time. We did Canadian whiskey and got into that for the first time ever. And as Canadians, I felt really bad about it. And Kent and Dave, same thing. And Nick, I think, Robin, we had maybe 4 bottles of Canadian whiskey before we started this year in the Whiskey Book Club. After Davin and then going through his second book, I've got
look, Davin, and I call him out in my book. Davin practically reinvented the entire whiskey, Canadian whiskey industry, and he deserves full fucking credit for it.
Cheers
right?
to that.
Cheers to that, right? Yeah,
Cheers.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, without Davin's advocacy, consistently and passionately,
Yes.
and from that level of knowledge that he has, Yeah, we wouldn't be talking about Canadian whiskey right now. You know,
No,
See, I both love Gavin and hate him at the same time. I love it for the fact that he brought our views to Canadian whiskey and how good our own local stuff. We walk by it all the time, and we're just like, Jesus, wake up, people. And on the other point is he's educating us on Canadian whiskey, and unfortunately, it is going to catch on. And then the cost is going to go like Scotch. It's going to go through the roof. We can't afford it anymore.
hey, you know what? Yeah, too fucking bad. You know. Yeah, you could have worse fucking problems than that. You know.
all right, Nick.
Well, we're buying it all now, so we have lots of stock for when it goes out of range.
Yeah. Hey, come on. You guys are actually getting stuff that we can't get. You know, right? So. You know,
And that's another one I'm sending you. It's a 22-year-old port cask rainwater from JP Weiser's, which just came out this year, which is fantastic. So you're gonna really like that rainwater too.
That rainwater is very delicious.
why is it called
It's
rainwater?
almost as delicious as that Seven Rebels deliciousness rainwater.
Okay.
Why is it called rainwater?
Oh, because that's what we're sending it as. It has to have a designation when it goes over the border.
Yes.
Absolutely, it is
Rainwater.
rainwater. Thank
I
you
still
very
think
much.
that's-
Yes,
We talked about this
That's a
last week.
dangerous
I thought we were on the
designation.
same wavelength. I thought we were there.
we never talked about this. That's actually, we never had this.
We should have this conversation after drama.
This is
When it's
the
not being
after when we're way
Yeah.
off the camera here. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Panel whiskey facts, and you know what I'm talking about. The bottom is just a little corner. It says whiskey facts. You've all seen them, I'm sure, when we're reading through it. Is there one that surprised you, or was it complete surprise to you, or you learned something to it? Kind of go back to that, because I want to go over all the different sections that Robin puts in the book.
Or
That's
that you
the
don't
one that I
agree
really
with.
like.
How about if you find one you don't agree with? You know.
Well,
Anyone else?
wasn't there one about heat?
About heat?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Oh,
I think it was
There'll
doing
be a
it.
program of us all
talking
searching
about
the book.
the barrels, heat and barrels. If you
Yeah.
cook the barrel too much,
Yes.
Too much heat. Oh,
Yeah.
Or-
too much heat on the
Oh.
barrels.
Oh yeah.
on
So
page
yeah, absolutely.
99.
Page 99?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was an interesting fact. How'd you like that picture of our friend Hiram Walker, right? Doesn't he look like the Wizard of Oz?
Yeah, always.
Excellent. And that also, so while you're looking this up, Robin, maybe you think about this. This is a question I wanted to ask last week. We have toasting and we had charring. And you said toasting's the flavors, charring. So toasting is additive, charring is subtractive. And I was wondering if charring could
What?
be additive. Well, you talked about whiskey. You good? Okay. Additive would be the toasting, the flavors coming out, the additive. The subtractive to the whiskey would be the charring, acting like the filters, right?
Okay, got it. Right.
But I was wondering if the charring could actually give flavor to it as well, because I didn't ask this last week, and I was wondering.
So with toasting, you're not producing enough char to actually add a subtractive element to the interaction. That's actually the difference. But in both cases, what are you doing? But you're activating the wood sugars inside the hemicellulose.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually what's going on. So anytime you apply heat, whether it in a light toast or into the various levels of char, you're activating the wood sugars. And so what you're doing is you break down the cellulose, you break down the hemicellulose, you break down the lignins. And that's essentially what you're doing. That's where the flavor comes. So the different levels. So for example, it was really wonderful. It's like when you go and study and talk about cognac and Armagnac, they are actively involved in toasting. There's no charring. There's no charring going on in France. It's all about different toast levels. right? And what are they doing? They're toasting that enough in order to again activate enough of the wood sugar inside of the hemicellulose in order to produce the compound. Now that's because it's a wine based distillate, right? Which is softer and gentler. You start getting into grains, that's a different story, and especially when you get into corn. So, like for example, what did John Hall, who was a winemaker,
Yep.
right? John Hall was a winemaker, right? And what did he implement over at 40 Creek? Yeah, right.
Well, the Canadian oak, which I thought was really cool with the Confederation oak, using Canadian oak. But
yeah, well,
I think you're referring to
also,
something.
he had different toast levels for each grain.
You know what? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
I didn't know that.
This was the thing that John Hall brought on top of the process that Seagram's had created, right? So, for example, he has a toast level for barley, has a toast level for corn, a toast level for rye, and a toast level because he was a winemaker, and Bill Ashburn was a flavor scientist. The two of these guys were fucking brilliant together, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And Hall a salesman too, so you should appreciate Hall going down to the States and being the sales guy that he was.
Yeah. I mean, he was like what, he was 200 days a year on the road, man. And Bill's back there just like and Bill's awesome. You guys ever meet Bill Ashburn? Bill
I tried to get him on, and he's
he
shy
doesn't want to talk
unless
to you.
he knows me.
He doesn't want to talk to you. I couldn't believe it. It was like getting an audience with the fucking Pope,
And I tried. And I was talking to everyone around him. It's like, let's get him on the show. And
he's a wonderful guy. He doesn't want to talk to anybody. He's a fabulous guy. He's brilliant. He's fucking brilliant. Right? He's really what's underneath 40 Creek. It's Bill.
And he stayed around after Hall took off, and he's and I think they put all their eggs in his basket right now, because everything you see about them, they all refer to him as well as still being on. Because there was a little bit when Hall left, and things kind of dipped a little bit for them. It really did, I think. And then actually, Nick, I know you agree with me.
Well, it wasn't after he left. It was actually who took, and this is part of the economics of whiskey. Who bought it?
And
who bought it?
Oh, you're asking the question? Sorry, Campari.
Yeah, and you know what? Campari doesn't know what the fuck they're doing.
Well, they wanted a Canadian whiskey, and they wanted the link into Canada with them, and they had a great link, and they gave them $270 million bucks.
Look, Campari didn't know what the fuck they had, right? So they're now just waking up to it now. They're now just waking up. It took them a long fucking time to get there. But they screwed that whole thing up. They took over that distillery and had absolutely nothing other than the desire to have that distillery. And John Hall, they had nothing underneath it in order to promote it. And so what happened was the whole thing fell to fucking shit. This guy was on a trajectory like this. Whiskey world was going, oh my God, Canadian whiskey, what the hell? What's going on? And all of a sudden Campari buys it and like, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck?
But we're up now. They've been great.
So here's the thing. I think Campari and Diageo are on a battle to see who can buy the most distilleries. They don't care about the product.
Well, in a way, you're absolutely correct. In a way, you're correct. So there's the big four. So the big four is Diageo. There is Pernod Ricard. There's Bacardi. There's Beam Suntory. And then you've got like maybe the B tier, which would be like Campari, and Constellation, and companies like that. And of all of them, and I call this out in the book too, Pernod Ricard gets my respect.
Okay.
Pernod Ricard gets my respect because, first of all, they have a heritage of spirits, of odd spirits. I mean, what the fuck, right? Pernod. I mean, are you going to get a more odd, right? However, if you're actually drinking that in France, it's what everybody drinks, right?
Yeah.
And but they saved Irish whiskey, and essentially they saved Canadian whiskey.
Well, Wiser's. Yeah.
Well, not only Wiser's, but the entire Hiram Walker thing. So what else is coming out of Hiram Walker?
Warts.
Lot 40, Warts, right? Pike Creek. Yeah, I mean, all of a sudden, this whole and Wiser's come out, and then guess what else they're making over there, right? Canadian Club, right? For being Suntory, right? So yeah, I mean, so Pernod Ricard did the right thing. All the other guys, yeah, I'm kind of wondering.
Actually, I'm going to stop you there because I just read an article. I don't know if it's an article for you or if it was a post on Facebook, but you're talking about Whistle Pig and you're talking about something 101, 201, 301, 401. Who was that? Who bought Whistle Pig so that they could expand into the Japanese market? Who was that?
Okay, first of all, no one bought them. No one bought Whistle Pig. So they have a minority investment of LVMH. So that's Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy. So who does LVMH own? LVMH owns Glenmorangie and Ardbeg.
Yep.
Plus all of those fabulous handbags.
Yeah,
right.
Beautiful. And my wife has them. We've got fake ones. I'm pretty sure. Not
and the fabulous scarves. The scarves. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is LVMH? But LVMH is the essence of luxury. It is the essence of what luxury means in the Western world. LVMH,
which is what Whistle Pig is now.
Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy. You ain't gonna get much more luxurious than this, right? So yeah. So what they did was they bought a minority stake in Whistle Pig, which for the only reason, which is to give them distribution into the other areas of the world in which people love and will pay for luxury goods, which means what?
Japan, Germany, sometimes Germany, Japan,
all of Asia, Okay. Right? So Whistle Pig went through its own problems, and so what I had done in that Facebook post that you had read, Dolph, was I had kind of said, okay, well, this is marketing 101. Marketing 101. Someone has some brain fart of an idea,
and they go with it,
and then gets other people to kind of go to grab onto that, right? And the second thing, and then the third thing, and the fourth thing is that they went, so for example, Raj Bhakta, who was the guy who was the money behind Whistle Pig,
he got some smart people to work for him.
Yeah, but Raj is kind of a lunatic.
Okay.
And he offended a lot of people.
Really?
I knew retailers everywhere that would not buy from Raj for a lot of reasons I'm not going to go into.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But what Dave Pickerel had, and for those of you who are not, are you all familiar with who Dave Pickerel was?
Well, he passed away last year. So, and the master distiller there, he was, previous to that, was he Beam?
So Dave Pickerel was the master distiller at Maker's Mark.
Sorry.
But Dave Pickerel was probably the Johnny Appleseed of the American craft movement.
He helped everyone. Yeah.
He was the absolute professional that was out there from a consulting perspective. Like Mike Rapucci we talked about at Sons of Liberty that you liked from up in Rhode Island. He was there, right? He was everywhere. And what Dave did was he brought expertise, and he said, "Oh, you want to make whiskey? Well, okay. Here's how you do it. Here's what you need to know. Here's the type of stills. Da 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 da." And he laid the whole thing out for you, right? What's that?
Get the rye from Alberta. You're 100% rye from Alberta. That's what.
Oh, and so he had this idea. He had this crazy idea. This distillery, which is probably, and to Davin's, and Davin will quote you on this, probably makes the best rye in the world, right, at Alberta.
Yeah,
and
he likes it.
Yeah, and they're using all of this rye out there for blends and other whiskeys. He says, "There's your whiskey. That's the whiskey you want to get. That's what you want to build a brand on." And actually, Dave had actually, and I found out later that Dave had actually had that as a business plan, and he had tried passing it to a bunch of people, and nobody picked up on it. Raj Bhakta did. Right.
Okay.
And so what they did, they hit a couple bad things, and then they lost both of them. They lost Dave and Raj, because Raj actually got kicked out of his own company, and then Dave unfortunately died. But
Yes,
in spite of losing both of them, that brand just kept moving forward. That's brand building.
They did. And I was going to ask you, do you think they still get it from Alberta Premium here in Alberta?
They don't have to anymore, because actually, so what happened? The whole idea was to actually, and this is where they got caught. So, for example, one of the bad moves that they made was they tried to pass this off as a Vermont whiskey.
Yeah.
No, they got caught on it, especially after they won Best Whiskey in America award. Like, yeah, get the fuck out of here, right? But yeah, but the thing was, they survived that. That was like Teflon, it wouldn't stick, right? And that was it had a lot to do with Dave Pickerel. Dave Pickerel was a bigger than life guy.
Yeah, he did, and people followed him and would drink whatever he produced. Really.
Yeah, and then he went on to actually help a lot of people, but he's a bigger than life guy, and he was a character. And honest to God, folks, if this industry needs anything, it's characters. I mean, and I mean that with absolute 100% honesty. Jimmy Russell is a fucking character. You know?
Well, you need the link. And we're people, and we like to have links to people.
Yes. Jim McEwen was a character. Willie Tate was a character. Richard Patterson, that motherfucker is a character, right? But they're all but that's what you need that. However, underneath all of that is there has to be a 100% rock solid authenticity.
All right.
And when you have that as a combination, that's golden. That's gold. And that's what all of these guys have. Authenticity, but they're characters. These guys, I've been out drinking with all of them. They're characters.
Those would be good nights, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, yep. It's fabulous.
Or early mornings, whatever. It's fun. As long as you're crawling yourself home and you get yourself home by 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, it's fantastic. I agree.
Or one of them gets you home, or you get one of them home. And then
no, there's indebtedness. You have to be there for your pals.
And then that's the secret that nobody knows.
and that's when you send the pictures to them instead of sharing it with the other people.
That's why Davin's going to get the photograph and not you.
Before us. All right. This will be our last question tonight, or maybe, probably. And we're going back to the new distiller. So Renzo, an engineer, and Brian Lee of Hudson Whiskey, and I have a Hudson Whiskey, ordered their first pot stills from Forsyth in Scotland. The stills came disassembled, boxes, no pictures, no instructions, no phone number to call. after 3 weeks, they figured it out. Now, I've heard this story from you, but I heard the same story here in Canada, and I'm pretty sure it was from Yukon Dave, for one. But my question to the panel was, who was the other one? Was it Still Waters or someone else who just got there still, and it's like,
Rick
build it? Anyone remember?
Yeah. Rick and also had that same problem. They got theirs on a Friday. The guy was coming out a week later. They said, screw it. And the two of them put together over the weekend, fired up, and they kind of went, okay, it didn't blow. Good.
And Dave, we're engineers, so they figured
great.
it out, right?
Yep.
Well, we bought a still from Carl out of Germany, and they said, hey, we'll send a guy over, and the boss said, nah, don't bother, we'll take care of this. And they put it together over the weekend and was distilling on Monday.
Oh, brilliant.
They had two engineers. One was a chemical engineer, and the other one was a mechanical engineer. So
Well, here was the thing about Hudson that you know, obviously just didn't fit into the profile, but for years they didn't. I mean, in the beginning, they didn't know that, you know, the wash still and the spirit still should be next to each other, and then you connect the pipes. They had the spirit still way the fuck down there, right? So that means at the end of the wash, their low wines were collected in a 55-gallon. Yeah, exactly, Nick. And they would gather it in a big carboy, and they would walk it down there, you know, and then dump it in.
All right.
Oh,
It was brilliant. And you know what? Hey, that's just the way we do it here, you know. So.
Maybe that changed the flavor somehow. It got cooler along the way. I don't know.
I don't know, but yeah,
picked up some oxygen of something. Yeah, the wheat
you gotta love it.
Into the back door.
You gotta love it. That to me is like, you know, who was that one beautiful model who was in the 1980s that did all the Coca-Cola commercials, and not Cheryl Teagues, but
she was late 70s, so early 80s. Who was married to Billy Joel? She did a lot of commercials.
No, it wasn't Christy Brinkley. It was the one that was married to Alec Baldwin. Who was married to Alec Baldwin? Anyway, I did a commercial. I did a commercial with her. And the commercial was all day her in a bathing suit getting out of a Cindy Crawford.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So Cindy Crawford. So it was her getting out of a swimming pool in a bathing suit. I mean, it's Cindy Crawford in a bathing suit all day long, right? And you want to know something? I didn't find her attractive at all, and I'll tell you why. She was flawless.
Okay.
And I found that completely unattractive, right? There was like nothing. I mean, if I were to draw in my teenage mind, it was her, right? But
okay, I'm completely lost. I thought Crawford in my mind's here.
No,
bring us back. Where are we going?
I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. It's the flaws in people's in people's stories that makes it attractive.
Got it.
And the flaw to the Arenzos was that still was way the fuck over on the other side of the room.
Right?
It was brilliant. It was brilliant. It was like,
did they keep it there?
How can you not love these guys? Yeah.
Did they keep it there, Robin?
Huh?
Did they keep it there or did they move it?
Well, you know, over time, William Grant took a position on them, and then William Grant actually then bought the brand, and then now William Grant owns the entire thing. But over time, what William Grant did was that they invested in, they upgraded the entire thing and made it, you know, so now it's all, you know, completely, you know.
All right.
But the beginning was great. I mean, like, you know, really? I got to go way the fuck over there. Brilliant.
I'll remember this story for the Cindy Crawford link to it. I really will.
Yeah, and there's a Cindy Crawford link in there.
That's good.
Only I could do that.
Well, that's an hour and 4 minutes. That's our time.
All right.
And again, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much. Thanks to the listeners. Thanks to the panel. Thanks to Robin over here. Thanks to, and I'll name them all, even though they're not all here. Cheryl, Drew, Cheryl, Dave, Drew, Kent, Nick, Sheila, and you, Robin. Fantastic night. Absolute pleasure. I learned, I drank, I talked, I learned more. It was fantastic. So here we go. Hands, hold the glass up. Here's the good company. Here's the good books right there on the side.
I can't toast it. I can't.
You
You
can.
can't toast unless you have something in it. So there you go.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
All
I
right.
was the same. I had to find just a little bit.
Yeah, the book.
Here's the good company. Here's the good conversation. And here's to seeing you all after our 2-week break. That's right. So we're back
Oh, we got 2
Saturday,
weeks off.
January 9th. So we got 2 weeks off. We're back January 9th, 2021 for our Whiskey Book Club 6th book, the complete whiskey course, a comprehensive tasting school in 10 classes. No, you got to get the front. And we'll be reviewing not chapters, but class 5 and class 6 with author Robin Robinson right there. And again, I say this all the time, final note, like, subscribe, and you won't miss a minute of all we're doing. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Cheers, sláinte, and have a fantastic